Well, thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. And tonight there's just one story: anguishing ambush or masterful management of predictable volatility as South Africa's leader visits the White House. Whilst in the Oval Office, US President Donald Trump waves fistfuls of newspaper cuttings he claims prove that there is a white genocide in Africa's powerhouse, and pulls out screens to play a montage of video clips to Cyril Ramaphosa of a notoriously provocative opposition leader singing incendiary anti-Afrikaner songs. Well, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa says that his meeting on Wednesday with his US counterpart went very well. Some onlookers may have been surprised at his upbeat assessment after what looked like a pretty chaotic and discourteous reception by Donald Trump. Dozens of white South Africans, known as Afrikaners, were received as refugees in the US earlier this month, as Trump claims they're victims of a genocide. Now, despite that South Africans of all stripes widely ridiculing this take, on Wednesday, Trump dimmed the lights and whipped out screens to play a collage of footage he says proves his concerns were valid.
Let me clarify that, because what you saw, the speeches that were being made, one, that is not government policy. We have a multi-party democracy in South Africa that allows people to express themselves, political parties to adhere to various policies, and in many cases, or in some cases, those policies do not go along with government policy.
But you do allow them to take land.
No.
You do allow them to take land.
Nobody can take land.
And then when they take the land, they kill the white farmer. And when they kill the white farmer, nothing happens to them.
No, there is
Nothing happens to them.
There is criminality in our country. People who do get killed, unfortunately, through criminal activity, are not only white people. Majority of them are black people. And we have now been utilized.
The farmers are not black.
I
don't say that's good or bad, but the farmers are not black.
Now, the videos were of firebrand opposition politician Julius Malema singing a notoriously inflammatory song about the Boer, another name for South Africa's white farming community. Now, it is a country that still has deep inequality and racial tensions that remain since the end of white minority rule and the racist apartheid regime that stopped in 1990. However, Trump's narrative is incorrect, and it is, though, a version of events that's been shared by his South African-born advisor, Elon Musk, the world's richest man. Now, despite Wednesday's meeting being an uncomfortable watch, Ramaphosa's camp did seem pretty positive about the meet.
There wasn't an opportunity to salvage the relationship, we wouldn't be here, right? President Trump invited us here because he believes that it's an important relationship. And so we will get over this noise and the shows, and we will get to the real nuts and bolts of the relationship. We did not come here with a begging bowl. South Africa has minerals that the United States needs for its industrial advancement. The United States is a huge market that we would like to expand in terms of the basket of tradable goods. We will continue doing that sort of work. And so this is not the end of the world or a doomsday scenario. They will still speak. They're going to speak on Gaza, they're going to speak on Russia, they're going to speak on the Eastern DRC, and they will speak on bilateral relations. And so we didn't come here with an expectation that just over one meeting they will be singing Kumbaya and all will be well. So we are realistic that in diplomacy, you have marathons rather than sprints.
Now, the South African leader was in the US to try and repair relations that have been frayed under the Trump administration, leading to cuts in aid and tough talk on both sides. So this meet between the two was being closely watched. Now, that interview with Vincent Magwena, the South African government spokesperson, was conducted by our Fraser Jackson, our Washington correspondent. He joins us now. Fraser, as I said there, we were looking to see what would come out of this meet, particularly after the tensions that we saw when Ukrainian leader Zelensky clashed with Trump at the Oval Office earlier this year. Any signs in the run-up to the meet that things perhaps were not going to go according to traditional protocol?
Well, I've been saying throughout the day that if things went well, and this could be a chance for the South Africans to reset, and if they went south, it would likely be because of this issue with the white Afrikaners that Donald Trump has really been running with for the last couple of weeks. Now, when the meeting was first scheduled to take place, there was going to be the arrival ceremony and then the working lunch where the two sides would thrash out these decisions and these issues, and then they would basically come together in the Oval Office to discuss what was talked about at that working lunch. Well, as soon as Ramaphosa arrived, the pool was immediately called and told that the order had been switched. So that perhaps could have been the first red flag that we had, that things wouldn't be going the way that they were intended to. And then the pool was told that there were going to be some TV screens inside the Oval Office as well. That then perhaps the second red flag that we should have picked up on, that things wouldn't be handled normally, as it were. And for the first beginning bit of the meeting, everything seemed to be going quite well. The first 10 to 15 minutes was quite jovial. There were jokes back and forth. And it was when the question time started and the journalists in the room tried to drill down into Donald Trump's repeated unfounded allegations of white genocide in South Africa, that's when things took a turn. Ramaphosa said that he wished that Donald Trump would listen to the voices of South Africans. And then Donald Trump said, well, actually, I've got footage that I need to show you. And he pulled out that ream of papers as well that he said indicated that there was white genocide going on. Now, it was a very uncomfortable 4.5 minutes that video was playing. Ramaphosa barely looked at the screen. He looked somewhat uncomfortable, but he did remain very calm and push back against that, and even used the rest of his entourage around him to push back against that narrative and to give a more personal testimony as to life in South Africa. So a very different kind of Oval Office meeting than what we're used to, much more in the Volodymyr Zelensky vein of things that we've seen. But it certainly went south compared to what we're used to seeing in the Oval Office.
Fraser, thank you so much for talking us through that. And it's interesting that you said that it went south. I very much felt that was the case. I also, like you flagged, felt very uncomfortable watching the exchange between the two leaders. However, it might have been part of the plan, is what I'm understanding. So I'm joined now by Professor William Gumede. Professor, thanks so much for making the time to speak to us. You actually advised some of the people in that room as to their strategy going into this meeting. And you think it went quite well. Tell us about, first of all, who was in the room and why you think it was a success.
My biggest fear was, first, thank you for inviting me to talk to you. My biggest fear was that it would be a Zelensky type of fallout in the glare of the global media, I think. But I am very positive in a way it turned out. I thought it was fair. A big thing for me was for President Ramaphosa to bring in a South African incorporate process, meaning bringing in business, bringing civil society in, and bringing the non-ANC partners of South Africa's national coalition government. I think that helped soften this meeting. If it was just ANC people in this meeting, I think it would have been a full-blown out Zelensky type of fallout. So I think it actually turned out much better than had been expected a couple of weeks ago.
So when you say You wanted a cross-section of what South Africa represents, not just the ANC, the ruling party that was responsible for a lot of the pushback against apartheid. Who was in that room and why? Just give us a couple of big names.
No, some key figures in that room. For example, there was Johan Rupert. He really is one of South Africa's top business people, internationally well-known. Lot of skin in the game in South Africa and also in the US. And I think, having him on board played into the tone of the Trump administration. I mean, the Trump administration, Trump himself, respect competitive business leaders who've done well. So it's very good to have Rupert there. Then we had John Steenhuisen, and he's the leader of the Democratic Alliance, the second largest party in South Africa, the party that used to be in opposition, but now part of the national government. Really important, because South Africa's current government is a government of 10 parties, so it's a coalition government. It came into power last year. And the opportunity in the negotiation is to present the new South African government, the post-2024 government, as a multi-party government, not an ANC majority government. That is why it was so important to bring in the non-ANC members of parliament and members of the national government and to have people like John Steenhuisen there. Then we also had a couple of golfers. I mean, we had Retief Goosen and Ernie Els, great South African golfers, and we know that Trump himself, loved golf. And both of these two golfers who worked there are very much respected by Trump, and they're also great patriots of South Africa. So it was important, and I have to remind you, viewers, South Africa is the world's most diverse society, and the government of national unity that we have now, this national coalition government, is actually more representative of South Africa's diversity. We are not a monocolor culture or a monopolitical society. We're a diverse society. So it is very important in these critical negotiations that a diversity of South Africa's talents are in the room to negotiate.
William, just very, very quickly, I'm just going to throw to you actually a quick soundbite from Steenhuisen, the head of the opposition, used to be the opposition Democratic Alliance, who spoke very clearly against this narrative of there being a white genocide, saying that, the violence that the farming community experiences actually affects a much wider cross-section of society. If we can just launch that clip from Steenhuisen.
South Africa. Of course, there has been a situation in some farms where farm workers themselves were killed, including some farmers, but it has affected both black and white for years. That's why we came up with a rural safety strategy. But there is no genocide at all.
Well, that was not Steenhuisen. That was, and actually, it's probably better it was, players, because what a day to speak to South Africa's vice president, because just hours before that very, high tense meeting between Trump and Ramaphosa, I actually was lucky enough to have a chat with Vice President Mashatile, who's actually in Paris, and I asked him about this question of the Afrikaners, and a very calm, very straightforward conversation, which is in such contrast with what finally transpired. We're going to have to leave it, William, but before I let you go, how do you think this is going to go down in South Africa? Did he do well, Ramaphosa?
I think he did fair. It could have been worse. And I think, this type of negotiations, one has to be open and transparent. and acknowledged the wrongs, not to be defensive. And to his credibility, he brought a diverse group of South Africans together. Not all of them agree. Like also, that's the nature of South Africa. You can't have one view in the world's most diverse society. I think that was important. I think, it laid a good basis for the rest of the negotiations.
William Gumede, Professor of Practice in Witwatersrand, thank you so much for giving us a bit of perspective on that very tense conversation between South African leader Cyril Ramaphosa and US leader Donald Trump. That's it for Eye on Africa. Thanks very much for joining us. Do so again. Take care.